Hey everyone, I'm back. And yeah, I'm sorry I've been away for so long, but I'll get to why. First, I must say, yet again, how honored and humbled I am that over 4,000 people have subscribed to the Chris Norman channel. Thank you all. Now, what's been happening with me? Well, here is the outline in case you want to skip around. First, work, and I'll try not to bore you with too many details. That side project that I'd mentioned blossomed. Instead of 3 months of work, it turned into 10 and became my primary job. My previous primary job still exists. It's now my secondary job. And I had a huge deadline that I just completed. Some of our data centers were closing, and I had to port my application from the old Solaris machines to a bunch of Linux VMs. Okay, enough tech talk. Suffice to say, the last client switched over last weekend, quite literally. Otherwise, I would have made this video sooner. And this was the culmination of 3 years worth of work. Second, family. A lot of little things that just sucked up the free time. One daughter moved home, and all that entailed, and then promptly left to go start her residency, which she should finish in a few more months. My other daughter and her roommate moved home for 2 weeks until their new place was ready. So for those 2 weeks, our garage was full. And then we moved them into their new place. Needless to say, I spent a lot of time in the backs of U-Haul trucks. We've had a lot of non-serious illnesses. My wife and I both suffered through pneumonia and earaches and other not-so-fun-to-talk-about gastrointestinal things. Nothing life-threatening, just enough to sap your strength and make it seem like lying on the couch and binging Netflix was the best use of my free time. And finally, my wife's mother just passed away at the age of 98. She lived a long and full life. It was a sad but blessed event. She'd been on hospice care for over a year, so everyone was ready. Life goes on. Of course, we had to rent another U-Haul and empty out the apartment, so my garage is full again. But now that I've caught you up on my life, let me tell you some things that happened this year. First off, I went to Gen Con and ran a GURPS session with my friend Jeff, one of the co-authors of the GURPS Game Aid for Foundry. We decided to run together. I would handle the role-playing sections and he would handle combat. This allowed me to roam around the table and help people out if they had questions. We ran it 3 times and had fun each time. Even though it was the same story, each session played out differently. But the most memorable part for me was in the last session, when the big bad guy had mind-controlled the monk, and the monk grabbed the rifle that the gunslinger was using. The gunslinger just said, "Okay," and let go of the rifle, and drew both of his pistols and started shooting. Now that's tactical combat. If you've never been to Gen Con, it's huge and wonderful. 70,000 people came last year. There's so many things to look at and do. The exhibit hall opens in 45 minutes. The vendor's hall. It's just going to be way too much of this. I'm a big board gamer, so I loved trying out new games. The only difficulty was finding out where to go. I think I have a game down there. Somewhere. I will say this, I truly enjoyed last year because of the scooters. At my stage in life, it was a small price to pay to be able to get anywhere effortlessly. And since I usually ride my own bike, a few 100 miles each summer, being on a scooter was second nature for me. And Jeff and I are going back to Gen Con this year, each running our own sessions this time. And GM Jason reached out to us on Discord, and he's running some sessions also. We tried to make it so that they didn't overlap too badly. Hopefully we can entice a few more people to try out GURPS. But the most interesting thing that happened at Gen Con was that I met Irene. You might remember her from this TikTok.
Steve Jackson Games, if you're watching this right now, you really should think about making a new edition.
Hey Jeff, we absolutely are watching. And while GURPS Talk is doing numbers, why don't y'all answer this question for us? No reason, just 'cause.
She is an amazing person, and we got to talking about GURPS and virtual tabletops, and she said I should talk with Meredith. Yeah, Meredith Placco, the new CEO of Steve Jackson Games. And, oh, would you like to take a picture with Steve Jackson? So I went to their booth and was introduced to Meredith. She told me that she wanted to talk to me, but she was really busy. She was constantly coming and going, and after about 20 minutes of me lurking around the booth, I saw her head off into the crowd. So I followed her, thinking to myself, okay, now what, Chris? How are you going to make this work? Well, when she stopped at a booth, I came up to her and said, I know that you're busy, but fortune favors the bold. When can we talk about virtual tabletops? She smiled and gave me her business card and asked if we could talk after Gen Con. I thanked her and walked away with a silly little grin on my face. Oh, and I saw Joe Manganella. He was just there to game and wasn't really doing fan stuff, but his friend said I could ask for a picture, and so he kindly obliged. I get a little starstruck when I see celebrities, and I understand the cost of fame can be constant, possibly unwanted attention. So I'm always very polite and I ask permission. Word to other fans out there, don't be a jerk. So my Gen Con experience was fantastic. Pun intended. Dang it, am I getting this pun thing? I got to meet Archon, who stole the hand of Vecna. If you know, you know.
The hand did come off, actually. The body vanished, but the hand, the artifact still remains behind.
Then it's time to destroy this thing once and for all. I kneel down. And I place the hand on the ground. And I raise my axe above my head. And I say a prayer to Tiamat. And I bring the axe down and chop my hand off, put Vecna's hand on, use my healing pool to heal, and teleport out. I'm sorry, it was just business.
I also met Steve Jackson and a bunch of cool people that played our GURPS sessions. What more could you want? Of course, after Gen Con, I reached out to Meredith, and she set up a video call with her and me and Irene. We talked a lot of the future of GURPS and what Steve Jackson Games could do to get into the VTT space and make some money. They were very interested. Meredith basically told me that Steve Jackson Games, as a company, is now more open to this idea. I told them that we were working on a newer, sleeker, cooler version of the GURPS Game Aid, and we should talk more after we got version 1 out the door. Nothing concrete was decided, but they told me we would stay in touch, and I was very happy with that. Now, the second part of the story is that around the holidays, I got an email from Steve Jackson Games concerning their new Kickstarter, a fantasy trip bestiary called Fiends 2. I forwarded that email to Meredith and Irene and said that this would be a great example of something they could monetize on a virtual tabletop like Foundry. Douglas Cole did just that with his Nordland bestiary. Steve Jackson Games already had the artwork, and all they needed were GURPS stats instead of the fantasy trip stats. And we could work to create a module for Foundry very easily. I wasn't expecting anything from it. I was just sprinkling ideas out there. And then I got another email from Steve Jackson Games. Or so I thought. But it wasn't. It was Steve Jackson himself. We exchanged a few emails about VTTs and how Steve Jackson Games could monetize some of their work cheaply, and they could dangle their toes in the VTT pond without having to dive in head first. Again, nothing was decided, but I thought it was a good conversation. At one point, he did mention that Steve Jackson Games was interested. But they are a small company, so it might take a while before they can put a lot of effort into it. In any case, I was pleased with the email exchange, and yeah, a little starstruck that Steve Jackson emailed me directly. So there you have it. Nick, Neck, and Nose are still working on the newest version of the GURPS game aid for Foundry, and basically I'm the holdup there. Once we get to version 1, I'll reach out to Steve Jackson Games with some concrete plans and see what they think. Who knows? I might get to see Steve Jackson again at Gen Con 2024. You'll probably see a bit more of me this year. Once we get the new GURPS game aid released, I'll have to remake all of the old how-to videos and show off the cool new features. You know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so a video has to be worth more than that, right? And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do even more with the GURPS game aid, and maybe even with Steve Jackson Games' approval. As the band Timbuk 3 put it in 1986,
The future's so bright, I gotta wear shades.
and as always, thank you for watching.